copas del nuevo pacto en mi sangre que es derramada por todos ustedes y por muchos y muchas por el perdón de los pecados. Hagan esto todas las veces que la beban en memoria de mí.
On the first day, we got to the hotel, we settled in. On day 2, we started in the morning at Casa Abierta, which is a daycare facility for the children of refugees. That means that the parents are from places like Nicaragua who've come down to find a better life.
Though they weren't especially welcome, they were allowed to squat on land that was previously farmland.
I was really surprised at the acceptance of immigrants by the Costa Rican people. We learned that approximately 25% of the population are immigrants, and there was no evident discrimination towards the immigrants. They accepted them, and which seemed to be in such stark contrast to the attitude our government has towards immigrants today.
While Costa Rica does not have enough jobs and housing for all these refugees, they are trying to be a welcoming place for them.
And when they get down into the outskirts of San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica, they find jobs that take all day, and they needed a place for the children to be. So the Lutheran Church in Costa Rica, ILCO, has set up this nonprofit called Casa Abierta, where parents pay what they can so that their children can have a good education and a good experience. The kids were wonderful. We had such a great time with them.
While at Casa Abierta, which means open house, daycare center, I realized that play is a universal language between children and adults. Whether the children were playing with the bubble makers or with the gifts from CTK members, no language was necessary. They wanted us to play with them, race cars, style hair, assemble puzzles, all amidst the sound of laughter. The sheer joy emanating from the room was exhilarating.
We had taken some Matchbox cars with us, and we put chairs on top of tables to build a ramp for the Matchbox cars to go down, and they wanted to climb up on top of all those. Hope parents who hear this won't hold that against us if they ever want us to be babysitters.
Seeing the Christmas morning look on the faces of all the children as we open the gifts bag. Particularly of one little girl who saw a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle of kittens, and she grabbed it and hugged it and said, "Oh, can I have this one?"
My most memorable experience at the daycare center involves the bubbles. This was our first experience with Ethelyn's bubble making contraption. The center has no outdoor play area, so we blew bubbles on the sidewalk outside. It was such a hit. The director of the daycare center is herself a refugee who has dedicated herself to serving the community in this way. She has a lot on her plate. One of my favorite photos is of her outside the center with a bubble maker, blowing a huge pile of bubbles with an even huger grin on her face.
And then watching these strings of bubbles go floating down the street, and people just walking down the street trying to catch them or step on them. The bubbles were rolling down there like tumbleweed.
Also on day 2, we made our way to ILCO headquarters, which is like their synod office for the entire country of Costa Rica.
And the ILCO offices, that's the Lutheran Church of Costa Rica. And we were so warmly greeted.
And the thing that I noticed more was their larger rooms were wide open and didn't have any walls. I really like that climate.
And at ILCO, we met with all of the program staff. We learned about all the various refugee green card movements they're doing, food programs, housing, all of the worship services, the LGBTQ community that they have there, and the transgender community they have there.
With a relatively small staff, the breadth of their work is astonishing.
While we were visiting ILCO, we got to meet Pastor Alexa, who is the first transgender pastor in all of Costa Rica.
She seems to be not only accepted, but respected within the church for being honest about who she is, despite the extreme prejudice she experiences in her life outside the church. I think it says a lot about the unconditional nature of love within the Lutheran Church in Costa Rica and of Bishop Gilberto.
Here was a church that really lives into the scripture of extending hospitality to strangers. The accommodations were basic, a room or maybe two full of beds for each family, and then the families shared a common living space, a common kitchen, a dining space, a playroom.
And what was the most special part about that was that we got to go and see part of a hostel that they had built that had 4 bedrooms in it and places for people to come and stay when they were going to do some mission trips or some work around.
And I went in one of the rooms, which is maybe half the size of our nursery at church, and there were either 6 or 8 beds in there, bunk beds.
We got to help dedicate that hostel space with the Bishop of Costa Rica, who was there, and we got to bring a piece of artwork from Christ the King preschool that now hangs on the wall of the hostel.
And then we celebrated communion with him. And it was in that communion that I really felt the presence of God. The gathering, the group, just having the sacrament spoke in Spanish and then translated by the bishop's son into English. It was a very, very moving communion for me.
Diciendo, esta copa es el nuevo pacto en mi sangre que es derramada por todos ustedes y por muchos y muchas para el perdón de los pecados. Hagan esto todas las veces que la beban en memoria de mí.
Se descubre, se alimenta en nuestro diario caminar. Hoy estamos muy contentos, pues nos gusta regresar como personas que buscan en la misa libertad.
After our tour there, we got to spend a little time with some of the staff just in a social setting. And they never met a stranger. We were all part of their family, a Lutheran family.
I think that I saw a church there that lives Christ's command to love your neighbor as you love yourself, with all the Good Samaritan story brings to that. This church doesn't do worship with social justice as a side. They flip it around. Social justice, loving your neighbor, is the focus. If you want an answer to what would Jesus do, visit ILCO and you'll see it in action.
Later on that night, we went back to our hotel, and to debrief what we had, we came up with a live podcast, which you can find on my podcast channel, Eternity Life Podcast. On day 3, we got up in the morning and we rode the bus up the mountains into the rainforest area of Costa Rica, where we ventured to a church that's in the middle of a banana plantation.
On the road through the banana plantations, cars would stop for bananas crossing the road on conveyors that raise up like a gate at a train crossing to let cars pass.
And what we found there are 2 sort of buildings that are close together. They're on the same highway, but about 20 minutes apart. And they're run by a clergy couple named Miriam and Samuel, who were Venezuelan pastors who in the Lutheran Church have decided to do some missionary pastoring in this poor, impoverished part of Costa Rica. Up here in Sarapiquí, or in San Julian, which is actually the name of the small town. Try and find it on a map. We met with Samuel and Miriam, the pastors there, and we started working on a building project that they had been dreaming about for about a year now. They needed a bathroom for their worship.
For the construction project, we dug a ditch for the drainage pipe that was super deep, that's very, very muddy. And then we put on tile in the bathroom, we put on a roof. Before we started, that bathroom was just concrete walls, and when it was done, it was a finished bathroom.
Spending the better part of 2 days there, we worked, visited, blew bubbles, ate lunch, and worshiped with this community.
On the trip to Costa Rica, I was forced to acknowledge how privileged I am as a middle-class American when I learned that the family living on the church property at San Julian had lived there for 8 years without a bathroom.
They had looked like about 100-gallon tank sitting on top of big stilts. that collected their rainwater. That was their drinking water. That was their water for the showers. That's all they had.
Working on the project made me feel like I was truly serving others. For many years, I'd wanted to do a mission trip that helped improve the lives of others. And this project was so desperately needed as the existing septic drain field was failing and the existing facilities they had were really substandard.
I was really glad we could help them with that. They really needed one. And as small and basic as it was a big improvement over the old one.
Here we were building a bathroom with one toilet, one shower, and one sink, and that was it for the whole church and for the family who lives in the back of the church building.
Well, I felt very inadequate, though I couldn't do a whole lot. I did help move rocks and outline the walkway that was just a mud trail.
After the larger rocks and stones were moved to the drainage field, I worked with Ethelyn and Melissa to create a gravel walkway over the muddy path to the bathroom. Our goal was to reduce the amount of mud tracked into the new bathroom. The path we created should help.
Well, seeing Pastor Daniel on his hands and knees in the bottom of a trench full of mud and water, laying stones to line the bottom of the trench, that was unexpected.
On day 4, we got up and we went back and finished the project. Some of you saw that morning I posted on Facebook that we needed help, that in order to get the toilet and the plumbing, we needed to bring in some material experts on this project, and when we were able to raise the money, we were able to finish the bathroom, which was really a glorious thing.
Our guide and translator, Rodolfo "Rod" Mena, left a lasting impression with me. Rod was Cindy's contact through months of planning. Upon our arrival, Rod was our go-to person for everything related to culture, translation, meals, lodging, transportation, and so much more.
He was very compassionate to us and to others. For example, Nathan was sick on the last day of our trip to Costa Rica, and on the way to the airport, Rod jumped off of the bus, ran ahead to a pharmacy, selected and brought back medicine and gave it to Nathan, and asked me to text him throughout the trip with updates on Nathan's condition.
I was so sick, and Rod leaped off the bus to go buy meds for me, and I was just so grateful for him.
As ILCO's communication person, Rod coordinates trips for all groups visiting ILCO. He manages work projects, budgets, logistics, and personalities, as well as the wide range of perspectives the visitors bring. Rod was an amazing host who deftly became a treasured member of our group.
Again, I was really impressed with Rod. His background is in communication, but he fully participated in the construction project, and the way he did that was he had researched bathroom construction projects online so that he could better translate the supervisor's instructions to us, because the supervisor only spoke Spanish.
The person that I remember the most from our visit was El Jefe, De Gerardo, who was the young guy in charge of the building project of the bathhouse. He would make an excellent CB, can do. I don't think there's anything that man cannot do.
The master, as Rodolfo called him, Geraldo, was an amazingly talented man. He knew his stuff and was great at getting us organized. And when we gathered at the end of the project to take a group photo in front of the bathhouse, the gratitude I felt from that community was just amazing, and it was an amazing experience to be part of.
Again, these people in San Julian are migrant workers. So they're probably immigrants. The people who have fled down from places like Nicaragua, they find their way in the northern part of Costa Rica, and they're looking for work. And what work is there but to work on banana plantations and pineapple plantations, which are really tough, long, labor-intensive jobs where they're exposed to pesticides and things like that. And they really need churches like San Julian in order to come together and have community and really help each other out. I was amazed at the number of people who came out for this worship service. It was standing room only, in the back. And the thing that we joked about was that a teenager is a teenager in every single culture. That even here in the middle of this banana plantation, the teenagers sat all in clump in the back of the room all together, and they giggled and took pictures and all that.
I saw again that we're alike no matter where we go. All the people are a lot like us, and we're a lot like them. People are the same around the world. We all want the same things. I remember mostly Pastor Samuel and Miriam in San Julian. They were a young, dedicated clergy couple, and everybody there loved them.
I've always spoken about the service that was my favorite, and that was the one led by Pastor Samuel and Miriam and the gathered community. It was just a great unifying experience, not only because we ranged in age from toddlers to old people, but across several scattered rural communities there, mostly farm laborers.
We had arranged rows of chairs for the anticipated participants, and then folks kept arriving, so we found benches and fit them into the space as well. With young and old sitting in chairs, on benches, on the floor, and leaning against the walls, the crowd was the most engaged of all the groups we worshiped with.
The service in St. Julian really spoke to me. Frankly, I was tired and dirty as the service came at the end of the second day of work on the bathroom. I brought a clean shirt to change into, but I just felt grungy. And the people started coming, and they kept coming, and they're all dressed in their Sunday best, and they all seemed so happy and joyous. And what had seemed earlier like just a primitive building suddenly felt like a beautiful cathedral. Just the joy and the people and the enthusiasm in the crowd. And when they opened the service singing "How Great Thou Art" in Spanish, of course, I felt I was in a spiritual community, and it was just a great experience.
After singing and sharing communion, Pastor Daniel presented our gift, a small cross made by one of CTK's members, to Pastors Miriam and Samuel. In turn, Pastor Samuel presented to Pastor Daniel a cross and donation box made by the young Costa Rican bathroom project manager, whom we fondly referred to as El Jefe. Something about the gift touched Pastor Daniel, and his eyes welled up. He appeared to be speechless, but the Spirit of God shone through his face, and he radiated love.
The next day we got up and we went to Guatuso, which is sort of like an indigenous community.
Natoku yoptenge. Natoku. Takanini yoroki kahu.
I could see that this was a community that worked and lived together as a Lutheran Christian community, but they were also a community that preserved their culture and their heritage, their Moleku language and customs. And everybody seemed to be involved with that, not just the old people.
And we learned about what the culture was like, essentially on what we would call a Native American reservation. It was very poor. It was poorer than where we had been previously. It was easily the worst hotel we stayed in the whole time we were there.
Every evening we gathered for devotions. We had amazing sharing during this time, laughter and tears. Once we were on the road, we invited Rod and Julio, our driver, to join us. Evidently, this didn't happen often with the traveling groups, but our group didn't hesitate to invite them and were delighted when they joined us. I especially remember the night in Guatuso. The only space large enough for us to gather at the hotel was in the front patio. As we shared that night, Rod shared the stories of how the pineapple and banana and palm oil plantations were ruining the environment. Costa Ricans live with much closer to the earth than we North Americans do.
Then the next day, day 5, we woke up and we went back to the church there in Guatuso and did arts and crafts with the indigenous population that were there.
It was awesome to see how quickly the ladies could carve and paint wildlife on the gourds and balsa wood.
But instead of doing crafts just to fill up time, these were crafts with a purpose. They are the livelihood of this group. They showed us how to make the crafts.
The women at Guatuso are such an example of figuring out how to make it when so much is stacked against you. Coming in as foreign visitors, it was wonderful to have them teach us their crafts. It felt so humbling to us, and I expect uplifting to them.
Watching the women carve on the hickory using just a broken fingernail file or a little piece of metal and doing these very intricate designs on this, and then some of them painting them and filling them in. It was quite a remarkable thing considering the tools that they had, and when I tried to work it myself, it's not working.
That was a good bonding experience, and just woman to woman, and we had fun creating.
At the end of that day, we drove to Arenal, which is the name of the volcano, and what was kind of a shock there was going from being in such an impoverished place, really in 3 different communities that we had been in at this point, that were all impoverished and feeling like we belong with little or nothing, feeling like we were one of the group because they were so welcoming. And then to go back into this tourist attraction, which was this volcano with these hot springs, which was gorgeous, and then go from being side by side with the people of Costa Rica to now they're serving us, they're waiting on us in tables, there's more food than we need. There are people, there's tourism and all the things that come with that. That was really a tough transition, I think, for a lot of us.
While we had the afternoon free, we really wanted to experience the rainforest.
I've always wanted to zip line, and Costa Rica was an ideal setting to accomplish this goal.
Whoa! The most fun activity was riding a zip line.
Okay. I'm going, wait, what?
The last night, we got to spend with each other. We had communion as a whole group and talked about our trip.
They didn't necessarily have a lot, but they were very content with what they had.
Most of the people that we saw there were not wealthy by our standards, but they were wealthy in friendship, they were wealthy in warm relationships.
It was good to be able to go and meet with the people where they work, in their homes and in their churches and in their businesses, and get to know them there. I think if our politicians and bureaucrats were to take a trip like that, rather than to drive through town in their caravans of limousines with their yes men and women, then hopefully they would come back with their attitudes not being so intolerant and with the comments that are so divisive that lead to walls rather than bridges.
I definitely felt like we made connections with the people we met and had so much in common. We are much more alike than we are different.
These people welcomed us into their lives, into their homes, into their churches, and into their communities. Because we had Lutheranism in common, because we had a love of God, we have the same rich theology and tradition, we had some of the same hymns, we have the same Holy Scriptures, and we share a common theme, which is that all people have dignity and all people deserve our loving and caring support. I hope that this video has helped other people consider a trip to Costa Rica, to consider our relationship with ILCO and the people there. And I hope that what you've seen makes us feel like we are closer to one another. We have so much more in common than we do before. And even in this time of us being separate from each other, it's a really good reminder that God binds all people together.